you're strong. You don't know. None of us knows what we can go through till we're doing it. And if I sometimes would say many years ago that if I had seen the future, what I had to go through, I would have run like the Dickens. I would have never pursued my husband like I did.
Welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast. It's your girl, Kate Bryan, for the final episode of 2021. There is so much to be grateful for and thankful for this year. So many amazing things happened for One Girl Revolution. We were featured on Good Morning America earlier this year. Then we were nominated for an Emmy Award. Our short documentary, The Girl Inside, was nominated for an Emmy. So many incredible things happened this year, and we're really excited for what is to come in 2022. So make sure that you continue to listen next year. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. Subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to our email list, our YouTube channel, all the things. Follow us. And please continue to share with all your family and friends. And we are so excited for what is to come in 2022. So keep an eye out. This episode, this final episode of 2021, features my mom, my mother. It has been a long time coming. I can't believe that I have been doing this podcast for 3 years and she's never been on the podcast. So she's full of so much wisdom, stories, knowledge, so much. And I'm so excited to share this episode with you. She reflects on her own life. She talks about 2020 and all the different difficulties that she went through and we went through and how she handled it. Also looking towards 2022, what she thinks about when a new year approaches. We're all works in progress, as she says, and sometimes it's just one day at a time. So I am so excited to share this episode of the One Girl Revolution podcast with you, featuring Mary Cullen Bryan, my mom. Mama, welcome to the One Girl Revolution podcast.
Thank you, Kate. Did I have a choice?
Before I started recording, for everybody who's listening, I told my mom, well, now you get to see how the magic happens. And you said, what did you say?
Well, I'm sorry. I said the magic happened the day you were conceived. So
we're not going to talk about that.
Anyway.
Anyways, I'm so excited to have
Obviously,
you on the podcast.
It was magic.
Obviously.
Anyway.
Thankfully it was. I feel like this has been a long time coming. The past 2 years, I have ended the year with a podcast episode with my sisters. And when I was talking to Moira and Delia, they both were like, you should have Mama on. So I'm excited to be ending 2021 with my mom, the OG, the original One Girl Revolution on the podcast.
Gosh, thank you.
So before we get into your story and before we get into all the things that I want to talk to you about, I want to start with a question. Who is a One Girl Revolution in your life? Who's a woman or girl that's inspired you?
Because I'm a more mature, older lady, I think there's been scores of women in my lifetime, maybe a teacher, people that imprinted on you, maybe people I never met or knew somehow had an effect on me. But the person that most is in my mind is my dad's mother, my grandmother Cullen, Irene O'Brien Cullen, was not only my grandmother, but she became my old lady friend and much a treasure in my life.
Why was she a One Girl Revolution in your life? Give me some reasons.
She was born in 1893, grew up on a farm, a younger of a great big family, the eighth child of 10, and had a sister just over a year older, but even they were kind of women before their time. About the time they graduated from school at that time, they moved with an aunt, boarded with her in Ypsilanti, and went to a school there for secretarial work. And they were like the only women in that class. So they were deemed, it was very curious to the men at that time, but ended up deciding to move to Detroit, she and her sister, and got jobs. My grandmother also was an accomplished pianist and played music for silent films. Women didn't often travel alone in those days. She also would hire as a companion. She had no problem taking a woman to their destination and getting paid for it and seeing places and then coming home. Um, didn't get married till she was in her 20s. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going to go with this, Kate.
She ended up living till she was 97.
Yeah, she lived to be 97, and she ended up, what a blessing. She was sharp as a tack. Certainly, she was getting older, and she couldn't hear as well, but the mind was brilliant right till the last few weeks. She was widowed. Her husband died in 1939. My grandfather of Lou Gehrig disease was ill several years before he passed. Left her with 9 children and other family members living in their household. And certainly she had a lot of support of some close friends and family and her kids, but just was this astounding, strong woman that just pulled it together. And because of her strength, a lot of people in that family were very close to one another, the kids. I don't know if it's because they lost their dad, but just was this kind of amazing woman. You know, her home was always open to anyone and everyone.
And her legacy lives on through you because you've carried on so many of the things that you admire about her. And I think that's important for all of us to think about the women that have inspired us in our own lives, to look at the positive attributes or the things that we really admire in them and carry that on. I know growing up, we always had anybody was welcome in this house. We still get, even at Christmas time, our childhood friends will come through at any point, and there's just like an open door policy. There's always a meal for people, a drink to have cheers with.
Well, and she established that legacy. Certainly it was reflective from a lot of people from those times. You know, it was after the Depression, or she went through the Depression, and you're trying to help people as much as you can within your ability, plus take care of your own family. But I think she really was an inspiration to so many people. Her grandkids, she had loads and loads of them, but just as a woman's perspective, I think I had things in my own life I went through that were a challenge, and she was my example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you are such a one girl revolution, and I'm so grateful to have you as my mom and to walk alongside you, or have you walk alongside me throughout all of the different chapters. There are so many different things that I want to talk about your life, but I think for the people that are listening, it would be great for them to get a little bit of an overview about who you are, where you're from. You are a one girl revolution, you know, in your early life. You are a one girl revolution in your singlehood days, as you like to talk about them, and then you have been a one girl revolution in your marriage and family, and with, you know, having 4 kids. Can you tell the people who are listening just a little bit of an overview about who you are and a little bit about your early life and then into your singlehood days and to where you are now?
Well, that would take weeks but I have to give it just minimal of it. I think looking back, I always was a kid that was pretty quiet, internalized things a lot. I never liked the word shy, just very reserved, but I was a listener, and I also remembered things, which is a blessing and a curse. But always was thinking things and quietly weighing them out. I didn't speak up very often about my opinions on things, but they were there. And I look later in life, a lot of strength came from that stuff. You know, I mean, sometimes watching not just my parents' parenting, having quiet observations or thoughts like, oh, I love how they do that, or I would never do that if I had a kid. You know, I would quietly assess those things, never dreaming I'd be in situations where I would have to make similar. But those things, interestingly, years later were a gift inadvertently, because I had already processed a lot of things. I didn't get married till I was in my 30s, almost 34. And I think if I got married younger, I would have been a good mom, but I would not have spoken out on things. I would have internalized more. So I kind of feel so fortunate that I learned to love and like myself first before I really got into a serious relationship. I had some guy friends that were casual I'd like to hang out with and go to musicals and dance, and but I'd kind of pull back if it started to get serious. And of course I did meet a boy at one point, and I'm still with him. So
Now you have 4 kids. So.
Well, and I work for the phone company. I grew up in Detroit, and as you back up a little bit, I think my childhood was not it it's hard to explain it. I think I had a mother, in my perception anyway, my opinion, that probably struggled with depression a lot, and just much of the time, other than Christmas and sometimes summertime, she loved was it's always like she just was on the verge of being upset or angry. Again, my perception, but I think um, getting off the subject here a little bit, it wasn't. I guess I knew a lot of kids that had it really, really bad, so my situation didn't seem as bad as theirs. So you just quietly kind of swallow it. And I think sometimes when I did speak up on things to people, or a teacher might be concerned about me, it's like, well, your mother has all those children. It would be dismissed. But that's another piece as I grew older and looking at not just my children, others. It allowed me to have more of an insight into kids going through a difficult time. Like, people don't always listen to them. You know, they listen, but they don't hear when they're going through a difficult time. But kind of jumping ahead, grew up in Detroit. Overall,
one of 8 kids.
Yeah, I'm second oldest of 8 kids. I had an older brother, so in essence, I was the oldest kid. Because when you have an older brother, it's usually the females that are taking care of the younger siblings, doing the household chores.
What was it like growing up in Detroit as one of 8 kids?
One of 8 kids. There was a lot of benefits. I overall lived in the same neighborhood almost the first 20 years of my life in the northwest side of Detroit. My parents both were from the city, so there was a lot of familiarity with that. But it's like anything in life. You look at the pros and cons. We had amazing neighbors, which at some point became a pretty rough, difficult neighborhood. A lot of older people. I didn't have many kids in my neighborhood, but was close to the school. I went to parochial school for 12 years, same school. Mother went there too, and some of my dad's sisters. But I was right near 2 main bus lines, Finkel and Dexter, worked at the phone company downtown Detroit, and I could literally stand in a corner and grab the first bus and get down there. So in essence, had some freedoms. I didn't drive yet. At some point, my parents moved out of the city, and I had to learn to drive. But I ended up working for the phone company initially as an operator, olden day switchboard. Then it became computerized. I ended up in Ann Arbor. And then things started to kind of change for women. The phone company started to allow women to become jobs other than secretarial or operator, and I became a telephone installer, and part of it was the money. It paid more money. I was really blessed. I was physically strong, could still outclimb most kids in trees, and so the height part of it. But I ended up loving that job, and I worked with all men initially, and again, I was still pretty quiet and reserved, but it wasn't too long before a lot of them really came to respect and encourage and like me. So I feel really fortunate about that, That's where I met my husband, and first time in my life, here I'm somebody like about 30, and I'm pursuing him. I'm asked him out for this date and the first time, and it's like I was as scared as a teenager, just choking up. Took him to a play to see Annie, and he'd never been to live theater before, but took a while. It was kind of more, we were friends for a while first, or so he thought from his perspective. But no, I don't know about love at first sight, but there was an attraction.
And he was a younger man, too.
Yes, he was a younger man,
He was 8 years younger. 7 years?
Not quite, 7.5.
7.5.
I remember a cousin that I was really close to, and once I found out the age difference, I was like, geez, I got like a brother that age. You think of perspective of being in a family, like, so I didn't say much to Bill, is his name, but I had a cousin that I was really close to, another highlight of my life, and on that same side of the family. And she was kind of my mentor, confidant. She was about 7 years older, and she'd check in with me once in a while, how you doing, or come on for lunch. And she was always trying to fix me up with different friends of hers or cousins of her husband's. But at some point I said, boy, I really like this guy from work, and started not really dating Bill. We'd go out after work or just hang out a little bit. And somewhere in there, I told her, I says, I don't know. I found out his age. And she says, oh, Mary. She said her husband, Jim, his grandmother was the schoolmarm and 10 years older than her husband, and it was a big scandal. This is, of course, many years ago. And she's like 28 and he's 18. But she says, you know, Mary, she said they were married 50 years, and they say she died with a smile on her face. So I guess I have that to look forward to. I'll be dying with a smile on my face.
Not too soon.
Well, not too soon, hopefully.
Hopefully, like Grandma Cullen.
Yeah.
Watch One Girl Revolution's Emmy-nominated short documentary, The Girl Inside, on YouTube or at onegirlrevolution.com. The Girl Inside features a poignant look at the stories of incarcerated women within Cook County Jail and a life-changing class. This short documentary, which is a part of an ongoing series, reunites a professor with 5 of her former students, and what is revealed is the girl inside. Watch today on YouTube or at onegirlrevolution.com. So you get married, you have 4 little kids. People that have listened to this podcast, whether with me or my sisters or some of the other family stories that we've shared throughout the years, we overall had a very happy, joy-filled family life and upbringing. And I think so many different things, the way that you and Papa raised us, really led to all the opportunities that we've seized throughout the years. It's led to One Girl Revolution. It's led to my brother getting his PhD, the girls and I traveling, all these different things. Your example, even how you lived your life in your singlehood days and chasing your dreams and pursuing opportunities or just jumping at opportunities that presented themselves. We really saw that as such a good example. Same with Papa, being in the Navy, going on these trips and adventures, and both of you continue that even once you were married and had kids. But on the flip side, we struggled with so many different things as a family. I know you had numerous miscarriages. I had terrible eczema. Delia and I both have Job syndrome. Moira's the perfect one, as
Peter
everyone
has.
knows. Peter has autism, a type of autism. We've struggled with, Papa had his head injury when he was on his 33rd birthday. I mean, it was like thing after thing after thing. And there probably were times when you felt like you couldn't even breathe or go on. How did you find the strength in those moments? Because I think it's important to ask you that, because there are so many people that are listening that have probably gone through similar things or maybe are going through them right now. How did you find the strength, or what was it that carried you through?
Alcohol. No, you know, it's interesting because I think a lot of things, I think as a parent, I wasn't even a parent yet, and I remember both my husband and I came from a household where it wasn't horrific, but there was some abuse. Mine was, in my perception, my mother, his was his dad, and we weren't, I think we found out we were expecting a child, and I wanted to talk about parenting with him, you know, what to do and what not to do. And he's like, we don't even have a kid yet. And I'm like, no, I wanted us to be consistent. I know there's always going to be that flex. One's going to kind of buff the other. And, you know, but I wanted that balance. And we would talk about stuff. You know, it's not a judgment on people choosing to spank their child periodically, but I just had this really solid thing about never whipping my kids at all, you know.
Or repeating the things that your parents
repeating
did.
Certain things that, like I said, I remember things as a kid and sometimes got a whipping or something for something I didn't do. And instead of saying, gosh, I'm so sorry, and apologize, that never happened. And there's a lot of power in just simply saying, I'm sorry, you know, oh my gosh, or I'm kind of overwhelmed because I have these kids. It's not an excuse, but that's how you connect with people. But I already had these opinions, and I'm not saying, there certainly was in the midst of that a lot of stuff. I think I wanted kids. If I got married, I'd have gone and adopted them or something. I always loved kids. I had lots of cousins and, you know, nephews and stuff, but if I ever got married, I was going to get myself some kids somehow, some way. But the point is, you never anticipate things outside that box. I had an opinion how to discipline or do certain things I wanted to do about health, and I thought I could handle a lot of behavioral things. But I never anticipated the stuff I got with kids with health stuff. And my son they didn't know he had Asperger's. They knew something was off neurologically, was their presumption as he started school. But on the other hand, I'm seeing the half full. I remember people thinking I was delusional, but I thought, no, I saw this kind, gentle little boy that was certainly really sensory to a lot of things, but was always really close to his sisters, and you got where you kind of adjusted it. So by the time we really got hit with a whole lot of that stuff in 1 year, where my husband had a head injury, he was in hospital and rehab 2.5 months. He's out weeks, and my youngest daughter was hospitalized because she kept losing weight, had a rash that was presumed to be eczema, like Kate had when she was little. Kate used to go to U of M, and they never looked outside that box. They presumed it was just eczema. But jumping ahead, as you kind of go through that stuff, I certainly was hanging by a thread a lot. I certainly cried, not so much for them, but for me. It's wary. But I never felt, why me? I look back, and it's kind of interesting. And people used to say, weren't you angry? Weren't you upset with God or whomever? And I said, no, why not? It could happen to anybody. But backing way up, when I had my first couple of little kids, and Kate had bad eczema at a very young age, and I'd breastfed her and did stuff that's good and healthy and was involved with a leche. And I just would sometimes say to them, I would make up little stories for my kids. And I said, before you're born, you have to pick where you're going. And I said, there's a magic crystal star, and God, if I can use that, or whomever, said, pick where you're going. And I would say it sarcastically, and I'd say, why? Why me? And my first two little kids were close in age, Peter and Kate, and they'd say, because you're pretty, or you make cookies. And they'd laugh, and every once in a while they're like, Mommy, tell me again how we picked you. And the curious thing, somewhere in there, I embraced that. If they picked me, all these kids, and I was directed to the situation by the universe or whatever, I was honored. I can do this. And thinking of my grandmother, I could do this. She went through a whole lot of stuff, challenges. I can do this because I had those kind of women to look to. Mm-hmm. I can do this.
And sometimes I think it's important for us to think about how we were chosen, like you said, whether it be by kids or we are stronger than we even know. And I think there's a saying that comes up a lot in different movies. I just watched Return to Me the other day with Minnie Driver, which we love. And the grandfather, if anybody's seen it, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. But the grandfather tells Minnie Driver, like, God chose you because you're one of the stronger ones. You're one of the strong ones for all the things that she was going through. And I won't spoil it for people, but I think that that's so important for us to realize is we are stronger than we know. And sometimes, not to sugarcoat it, but sometimes things happen to us because we are the strong ones. And then our example and our journey and our stories and our experiences can then help other people, which we've seen in our family.
Well, and I was really strong until after that really challenging year with a baby hospitalized and the husband had injury and some other things going on. I go to see my grandmother. It's the last time I saw her, just a couple months before she passed, and I'm at her house in Detroit, and she knew all the adventure I'd been on. And she put her hand on me, and she said, "You're so strong." That's when I cried.
Yeah. But she saw it, and she was strong, too. It's like strong people.
She was relating.
Yeah. Strong women see strong women. We see these stories, and yeah, it's so difficult. I wanted to ask you about that just because it can be so, we can feel isolated, and I know that there were times where you felt isolated, even though you had these little kids.
Well, and I can look back now, and I think sometimes, because I was kind of more of an internal person, I really didn't ask. I did ask for help from some people, and sadly didn't get very much. Sometimes the people you presume or you expect to get help from, you don't. But I also wasn't good about asking. I look back now, but it's made me in a situation in this part of my life where I know how that feels like. I'm more likely to try to reach out to somebody or send them a note, if they're homebound or need something, a little card or something, and write a note, because we've all gotten away from that contact. Just we all love those notes in the mail and a card or something or a phone call. So I'm trying to get better about that.
Well, you're the best. So anybody that is listening to this who's ever received a card from you, they know.
I have an expression I coined that I should have solidified, and I said, you don't have to die to have many lives, because I've done a lot of different things. One thing led to another, and an opportunity, just things I never even thought I'd be doing, good things. But just, I have no regret, as challenging as everything was, it was my job. I think that's another thing too. If we look at that, whether you're in a relationship, marriage, or a parent, if you approach it like, this is my job, what can I do? What's the best I can do? We don't have to be perfect. Trust me, I am not perfect. But we approach stuff like that. I want to, and your kids are learning from you. Everything you say and do, it's going to impact them, I know not to let my children alone with too many people because they could reveal stories, but I used to say periodically they have witnessed a theatrical performance, but they've never asked for an encore, so it must not have been too good. So,
if you're enjoying this episode, please subscribe to the One Girl Revolution podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. We have over 130 episodes featuring so many inspiring women and girls across the country who are changing the world through their lives. Every woman has a voice, every woman has a story, every woman has the power to change the world through her life. Every woman is a One Girl Revolution. Subscribe and share the One Girl Revolution podcast today. So I think of you in my mind as the OG, the original One Girl Revolution, and you alluded to some of the stories and some of the reasons why. And people who listen to this podcast or have read anything that I've written or said, or my siblings have written or said online, you really are such a beacon to us, and you are the One Girl Evolution in our lives. Why do you think that is? Why there were so many things in your life where you really were a woman before your time, whether it be being a telephone installer, right as that was happening. I know that you were, almost 34 when you got married. That during that time in the 80s, that would have been like unheard of because everybody was getting married younger. And then even a lot of the things that you did to help us, it was before the time when I had terrible eczema and had all my health concerns. That was before the times of Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and all the luxuries that we have now. And you were doing research before you could Google everything. You were finding La Leche, you were finding food co-ops, getting organic foods for us, or trying different things. What do you think is like the driving force behind you being that woman before your time?
I think I always was interested in a whole lot of things. I'm not Native American, but I always loved and explored the stories and the elements, maybe in another life, I joke. I don't know. But I always was curious. I always loved to read. I remember as I got older, before I even had a family, and people said, "Oh, you changed. You kind of became more outgoing." I don't think we change. I think I somehow blossomed, and I find dual emotions. Sometimes you see people in a similar, that I feel like I'm a kinship with, where they're in a similar situation, and part of me knows you can do this. Find something that's going to feed your soul, bring you some joy or interest, and it can be a hobby, it can be volunteering somewhere. And I think even before I had a family, I'm not 100% Irish, but I was always drawn to that culture. And in my early 20s, I happened to get involved in the Irish American in Detroit. And little by little, can you work on this? Can you do that? And it's like the next thing I knew, I was not unhappy before, but all of a sudden I was just having so much fun because I was focusing more on myself than other people. I was feeding my soul. It's like I often talk about Dumbo the movie. I found my magic feather. I could fly. I didn't need that feather, but that was the thing that helped me. I never would have become a telephone installer if I hadn't ventured into that or something like it, because that's where the confidence and I became solid. I became to learn and love Mary. Mm-hmm. So that was a piece of it. looking back, there's more clarity with a lot of things and there's equal confusion. How did I get here? How did I do that? And even once I had a family, I worked for the phone company 16 years, and I thought I'd go back. Well, I'm on maternity leave, and I found out somebody else invited them to be my baby coming after Kate. It was my second child. And I remember thinking, I love that job, but I had mandatory overtime and some other things. So made the decision with my husband's support to stay home with kids. But I ended up joining La Leche more for a social thing, just to meet other people, because my social life was the phone company and my friends, which I still have a lot of them from that. And of course, my husband still worked there, so I had that link. But La Leche ended up being a godsend because it isn't even about breastfeeding. They were amazing resources for childcare and how to do potty training and things. And then came the food co-op. So before I really was making decisions about my kids, I had these women that were already in that realm.
Yeah, you would always say to us, like, even in our singlehood days, you've always said, if there are times when you are just struggling or having a hard time, like, find something that feeds your soul. Find a talent. Find Moira doing hula dancing, me doing kickboxing or sculling when I was in DC, Delia with Japanese or trapeze, all the things that we've tried. Try something. And I think it can feel very isolating as a woman because sometimes we don't feel like we have community. And I know even moms who are listening sometimes don't feel like they have that community, but La Leche or other moms groups can be such an outlet. So just find something that sort of feeds your soul, that's outside of your house, outside of your everyday, outside of your job, to give you purpose and feed your soul.
Well, and I think it's like that for children too. I think sometimes I remember being a kid and kind of envious of some other kids that had something they felt cool about. It could be ballet dancing or yodeling. I remember being in school and a little non-having teacher having kids come up with a talent. And I remember just being, I don't like the word jealous, but there was some envy. I thought, oh gosh, I wish I knew how to do something special and unique. But I think all kids, it's like, I love Montessori because a lot of the Montessori, I incorporated some of that with my kids, and then I did daycare 10 years. But I think find something that kid likes to do where they're going to have fun. And it can be drawing, playing in the dirt. I mean, I don't know. Something where they're going to feel confident and have fun. Then you build on that, And I think somehow something was guiding me. I absolutely believe that, whether it's my ancestors or God or whoever you want to call it. I always felt, yes, I had those moments of weariness with life, but I always overall felt something was guiding me and looking out after me. Grandma or something else.
Mama, you're so wise. So I want to ask for your wisdom on a couple of things. So looking back over 2020 was such a difficult year for so many of us. And then into 2021, we're still dealing with 2020. It feels like 2020 part 2. We've all lost family members, friends. I know you lost numerous family members. You lost your best friend right before COVID, Mary. Shout out to Mary. We love her so much and miss her. But for all the people that are listening, it's been such a painful couple of years and so difficult, and also difficult because nobody really knows how we're going to get out of this. What are ways that how have you gotten through it? What has this experience been? And then, do you have any wisdom for people?
Well, I think, and this is my perspective again, I think because we went through a lot of things health-wise when our kids were younger, I have dogs and dust and live in a house where if you came in, you're like, oh my goodness, clutter, but was always very conscientious, just washing your hands, eating pretty healthy, and even when I did daycare, I'm really proud of the fact those little kids, I was just licensed for 6, but we still have a relationship with most of those kids.
We still get Christmas cards.
And it's 20 years ago that I stopped doing it. But the point is, I wanted them to feel like, not that they're at daycare, I wanted them to feel like at Auntie's. And they ate pretty healthy. Almost everything they ate was fresh made. Yeah, we had cold cereal once in a while. But, and another thing too, I love music. Music was often on Rodgers and Hammerstein, my favorites. A little bit of Motown because I'm a Detroit girl, and Beatles, whatever. John Denver, loved it all. Folk, anything and everything. But the point is, I'm really proud of it. Sometimes people think kids like, what's your schedule? What are you doing for the day? And I think everything you're sharing with your kids, they're learning. You can be walking down the street and there's a manhole. Hey, what do you think that is? Oh, that's telephone or that's electric. You want the kids to look around. And because I worked for the phone company, my daycare kids knew what was electrical, what was cable, and what was telephone. I do a garden. They could identify the little plants out there. Of course, once they were growing, I had to frame it in. They couldn't get in there, but they would go out and help me and harvest. They knew what the plants were. They knew rhyme. They'd be eating their little lunch, and we'd play rhyme. This is kids who were 2 and 3 that picked it up quick. So you want them to have that hunger and make it fun to learn. I'm always really proud of that because all those kids have done really well and they've all achieved.
So it's establishing like during 20, because I asked you about 2020.
Oh, I'm sorry. Kate's grown up with that. Yeah. What gave me hope? It gave me hope because I've kind of been through a lot of things, or I've felt ancestors coming from Ireland. My grandmother's grandmother came over and had family members died on the boat coming over and held a little sister that had passed, hoping they could just get to New York where they could bury her because everyone was buried at sea. These people came through tremendous trials. And even those stories have fed my soul, the strength of those people. And not just the women, but primarily the women. But back to 2020, in essence, I've kind of lived an element of that. I've always respectful and cautious of any sickness, but was always conscientious. Just eat healthy, wash the hands, take your vitamins.
You joke too that when people would ask you how are you during the pandemic, and you would say, which one?
Yeah, which one? Or even the recession.
Full of many different, or a recession. Which one?
My dad was a plumber, and I was born in 1948, and it was only a few years he had just become a plumber, and there was a recession, and he lost everything. He had built up a little business where we lived on food stamps and surplus food off, and whatever people brought us. And even as a kid, I very rarely had boots or mittens. We were close to school, or you wore socks over your hands, and I'd take them off because I'd be embarrassed to go into school. But you look back, I remember mostly in life the kindness of others, whether it was a teacher or a nun, there was always somebody on your route. Yeah, I had some teachers that weren't very nice or people to me, but overall, people are always looking out for kids and stuff, and I hope to do the same. But I don't know, I came through it just looking back. The world's come through different things, but horrific things. You watch the Holocaust, and it makes me weep, and I'm thinking, holy Toledo, people survived that mess. Mm-hmm. That horrific thing, and there's still famines and things going on in the world today. You need to sit down and look, how blessed am I? The fact I can turn on a light, I can run water and take a shower. It's still amazing to me because my old grandma that was my treasured, most loved friend, I remember living on the farm when they got an inside pump, and it was like a miracle. And she still would talk about that, or having electric lights. How amazing was that? So that touched my heart and soul, and imprinted on me. It imprinted on me. So I appreciate the value of things going on in this world. I appreciate medications that can help people. But
my biggest hope is that everybody remembers in 2020, like all the things that we were grateful for and thankful for, and how people came together as a community, family members looking out for one another, neighbors looking out for one another. There was as much as we were going through one of the most difficult things in my lifetime, in many of our lives, it was one of the most difficult things. On the flip side, you saw so many people doing so many beautiful things and looking out for one another, and being really grateful for like running water, being able to wash your hands. There were so many people even during the pandemic that couldn't do that. So I hope we continue that.
Well, even in the world today, there's people that do not have those luxuries to them. And I think, unfortunately, much of what we see in the media and on news is negative stuff. And the reality is, there's a lot of wonderful, beautiful stories out there. And it might be kindness to an animal or a kid or a homeless person. We have the power. We have the power to, like, do something for somebody. You know, there's organizations collecting things all the time for women in need and homeless people and veterans. And we could go on and on and on. Find what's interests you and give your time or your money or whatever.
Yeah, I always say that, find your organization or find your issue or your topic or something that you can donate to or volunteer your time or your talents. If you have a talent that you want to give, there's so many different ways that people can give back. And sometimes it's the littlest thing, even you talking about handwriting little cards. That was one thing that I tried to do during the pandemic.
There's a place up near us in Holland Nature Center, and it's actually the #1 place in the state where they rehabilitate injured wild animals. It's a beautiful, wonderful place, Howell, Michigan. But last year they had like a bottle drive to raise money for the place because they're very much dependent on donations. And they're one of the biggest places in the country that does this organization, but they got bombarded just with pop cans and bottle cans. So, and sometimes kids will come around here collecting for their organization, and it's like, we don't drink a lot of pop here, but I can usually scurry up some bottles and stuff. Like, here you go. You know, I'm always collecting them because it's 10 cents a bottle here in Michigan. But no, even something like that. Find some place that'll take your bottles or secondhand clothes. There's always something. Find it.
So looking towards, we're tying up the bow on 2021, and in some ways it feels like we're tying up the bow on 2020, hopefully. Looking towards 2022, what does the new year bring for you? How do you look at the new year? Do you look at it as you want to do like resolutions, or does it bring a new hope? For me, it always feels like a new year to find new hope.
I was really close to my father, and he would use an expression, I'm a work in progress. And it's the last words I heard out of his mouth, and I remember thinking, gee, Dad, he knew he was passing on. But then those words they're my mantra. I'm a work in progress. And I think to just, I don't do resolutions, sorry. Pause. My mind, sometimes my mind's thinking of several responses at once, but I think I'm just a work in progress. I'm a human being. I always have something I'm trying to be better at or do better, writing notes to people. I always have an ongoing list. So yeah, sometimes when the new year starts, I'm thinking I'm going to be better about this. And it might be something for myself, like exercising. The church I go to has a little organization. They happen to call it Serving Irish, but it's like it's not even for our church, but it's people in the community that might need a meal, or maybe there's a new baby and I've done stuff before for them. I want to get more involved because sadly sometimes people had a loss in the family, a parent or grandparent or a child, and just taking a meal to them, or if I knew they had kids, I'd make sure I had cookies too, or maybe a little card game or something. How old are the kids? Try to make it a little more personal. So when I walk in, they see the cookies, and that's the first thing on their mind. It's like, cookies? It doesn't get you over the sadness or the pain, but it gives you a little bit of a diversion, And people have done stuff like that for me too. So certainly I know what it's like. I appreciate it. But yeah, things like that, I'm always like, okay, you don't have to wait till the new year. You can do it anytime.
Mm-hmm. And I just love that quote. I'm a work in progress. I'll always remember that.
Yes.
And that's become a mantra for me as well, that you don't have to wait until the new year. And some people, they want to do New Year's resolutions and they want to try to do new things, but you can do that at any point throughout the year. Mama, I'm so grateful to have you on the podcast. I want to end, like I always end this podcast, on one question. If you could leave women and girls around the world with one message, what would it be?
You're strong. You don't know. None of us knows what we can go through till we're doing it. And if I sometimes would say many years ago that if I had seen the future, what I had to go through, I would have run like the Dickens. I would have never pursued my husband like I did. But being where I'm at now, I have absolutely no regret. I regret nothing. So sometimes it's good we can't see the future, because it would have scared the heck out of me. But no regret. But it's like, just be strong. You know, you can do this. Ask for help if you need it. You know, I said I didn't always ask, you know, so sometimes I'm so a work in progress. I still have to work through bitterness towards other people sometimes. This long past, it pops up sometimes, some little thing. But the reality is, you can do this. You know, somebody's going to help you some way. You have to ask for help, or just take a moment, take a pause. I remember being a telephone installer, and sometimes being on a job, you had to run a phone. In the olden days when the phone company did phones, and you'd go in some house sometimes like, holy heck, how am I going to figure this out, running wire where they wanted the phone? And every once in a while I'd say, you know what, can I come back later? I'd either go to lunch or do some little easy jobs, apartments or something. And amazingly, sometimes just having that pause would have more clarity. Oh, that's what I'll do. Or ask for help. But most of the time I could figure it out, just taking a little break. And even being home with kids and stuff, sometimes I wasn't sure how to handle something, or if they were mischievous. Let me think a minute what the consequence is going to be. I'll let you know in a couple days. But yeah, take a pause sometimes if you're overwhelmed or scared or something. Just take a moment, take a break. And often the answer will come to you on your own, but if not, ask for help. Be strong.
The pause that refreshes. You always say the pause that refreshes. Sometimes you have to walk away from a situation. And I think the great thing about social media and the great thing about even online platforms and even Google is now more than ever, people can get help if they need it. Even they don't even have to share their name or their personal, if they don't want to share their personal information and they just are looking for somebody to talk to, if it's some sort of mental health issue. There are so many resources out there. So if you need help in any capacity, in any way, there's so much out there to support you.
And keep going at it. Maybe the first venture may not help you, but we have the internet and things. Just go on there and take time to look for something or ask around. Oh, guess what? Call churches or resource centers. There's plenty of places out there, even if you don't belong there, will help you, guide you. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, Mama, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's long overdue. I can't believe that it's taken us this long.
Well, thank you for picking me to be your mother.
You're welcome.
Before you showed up.
Thanks for being my mom. And for everybody who's listening, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year, all of the things from One Girl Revolution. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at One Girl Revo. That's the number One Girl REVO. And you can find more information on One Girl Revolution at onegirlrevolution.com. That's the number onegirlrevolution.com.